Hey everyone, welcome to the first and hopefully not last Q&A video. I'm going to be trying to answer a bunch of questions that I've been getting all over my videos. Now, if you look back at the videos, you may see that I already typed out a response. Most of these questions I feel like deserve a bigger kind of video response. So if you have any more questions you want answered, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, if you're not already, please consider subscribing. It really helps me know that you want more of this content. So here we go. Jorge says, perfect, and thanks for the tab, but could you complete the tab with the introduction chords? So what Jorge's asking about is actually the beginning of Jerry's breakdown, and when I was doing Tabmania this year, I didn't include the intro to that song. So yeah, sure, I can do the intro. I'm going to go ahead and do it right here and put the tab on the screen, but also whenever you get that tab for free on my website, the intro is going to be included now. So let's do it. Let me just pull up the tab here. I got so many folders, man. Right, so on and so forth. Maybe one more time. There you go. Blind Tom says, great lesson, Marcel. You are a wonderful teacher and one cool dude. Why, thank you, Tom. Here's what is missing in bluegrass lessons. Real deal how to play rhythm. If you watch the good ones, they do not play boom checka. It's a lot more complicated than that. Some of them seem to have a snake writhing under their right forearm skin. I have always been slow on that type of rhythm playing. Marty Stewart is a great example. Like, he is playing double time without breaking a sweat. Any help there would be greatly appreciated. You know, this is actually one of my favorite questions I've gotten. I think it's a really good example of something that needs explaining. So I'm going to break down a couple ideas of how to play rhythm. First of all, really what you start with is the boom check, which is all downstrokes, right? Down, 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 down. Really what you have is a shallower stroke and a deeper stroke. And you can do quite a bit with that. After that, what you would want to move to is alternating bass, right? You want to hit those bass notes the same way a bass player would. You can do even more with that. But the question coming here is, what do you do even beyond that? And the first thing I would say about that whip motion is these really gentle upstrokes that come in. Really, for it to sound like bluegrass, the upstrokes always have to be lighter than the downstrokes. And one of the first ways to include that into your playing is by doing, I think what he refers to here is the boom checka, which is a really shallow upstroke coming back. Boom checka, boom checka, boom checka, boom checka, right? Now, that's obviously not a more complicated rhythm pattern, but what it does is it clues us into how our rhythm can get more complicated. In between every single downstroke is a hypothetical upstroke, right? You could play down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And if we are counting music, we would refer to that as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So every number is a downstroke, every and is an upstroke. Now when you start deleting strokes out of that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, that's when you get really interesting strumming patterns. So for instance, if I delete, what is it, the and after 1 and beat 3, I would get the strumming pattern for Time of Your Life by Green Day. 1, 2 and 4 and 1, 2 and 4 and 1, 2 and 4 and 1, 2 and 4 and, right? I've deleted the end of 1 and B3. That's today's that's not how Bill would have done it or explained it moment. When you take this idea and you start speeding it up and you start doing these other crazy patterns that you might see players do, yeah, you can put them into a bluegrass context. I wouldn't say that it's really a bluegrass player would play rhythm. I mean, even some of these patterns that you hear that are like, they feel bluegrassy, but they're not. They've really taken on a lot of other elements, and that's fine. I mean, that's great to include in bluegrass, but if you're really being strict about it, it's not really. I hope that kind of answers the question. If you want to make more complicated strum patterns, think of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and just start deleting some of those strokes, and that's when the strum patterns get really interesting. But like I said, is that strict bluegrass? Probably not. Alright, what do we got now? Kyle says, are you still willing to put the tab up? This is the best guitar cover of the song that I've found so far. Why, thank you, Kyle. Flattery will get you everywhere. Now, Kyle's talking about a cover I did of the ending theme from a kid show called Steven Universe. And yeah, you can have the tab. I'll toss it in the description of the video, and also I'll just shoot you a message. I'd give it to you, Kyle. Alright, next up. Sam B says, my kids are putting together a brass band. We are not a pro musical family, and I can use a lot of help with ideas to guide them. Awesome. So, I think the first thing I'd say to you is make sure that the lineup makes sense. And you don't have to treat this super strict if you're just playing with your family. But, you know, there's 5, 6 bluegrass instruments, right? There's guitar, mandolin, bass, banjo, fiddle, and dobro. And really the only instrument that you can have doubles of and have it be okay is guitar. You don't see a lot of bands with 2 mandolin players or 2 banjo players. Sometimes you see dual fiddles, but it's not super common. Now, like I said, if you're just playing with your family, it's okay to have some doubles. It's not a big deal. Obviously, in jams, all the time, we have doubles of instruments. But in bands, you don't see it very often. After that, I think that if you have a bass player, a mandolin player, guitar players, or if you have all 3, you should really try to instill good rhythm in them. And I think a really good way to do that is to try to nail the boom chuck pattern, right? Make sure your bass player is just a dedicated boom player, and that you got a guitar player, you know, that will do both roles, boom and chuck. And then you got a mandolin player that's just got a real steady chuck. I think that'll help your family band more than anything else. Now, if you do have some of the other instruments like fiddle, dobro, or banjo, I think you could really push those people towards learning melodies, and then you have a setup where you have a good rhythm section and you have some melodies, and you can start playing these songs in the break, verse, chorus kind of style. That's not to say that you don't want your guitar players and your mandolin players eventually playing breaks. This is just maybe a good place to start. Once again, I have no idea where your family is sort of practice-wise, so obviously that advice is only good if everyone already knows their chords and everything. But I think that'll help you along. Alright, cool. Jorge says, oh, hey, it's Jorge again. Jorge says, bend a string on an acoustic guitar, it's a beefy job. It is a beefy job, man. I feel like I have a much better time if my thumb is coming over the top, you know, Sylvester Stallone style.
Over the top, Dad! Over the top!
Sylvester Stallone, over the top.
Apart from that, I also like to put at least 2 fingers on the string that I'm bending. So thumb over the top if I have 2 fingers on a string. I have a much easier time sort of squeezing between these 2 directions as opposed to having my thumb free floating in the back and trying to push this string up. Is not as easy at all. Normally when I do bends as well, I'm really only bending my B string, and I can get a whole step out of that puppy, or my G string, and I can only get a half step. Sometimes I bend my low E, you'll get stuff like this, but that's a lot less common, I think, for me. If you're wondering why I don't bend my high E string more, I think it tends to come off a little too bluesy or rock and rolly for me. I know that's not a great answer. I'm sure you could find some great context for it to really work in, but I don't have one that I really like yet. The only time you will see me do it is in that pre-bendy kind of Tony Rice way. I guess Chris Eldridge does some of that too. Sounds like this. You know, that. Sometimes I do that on my high E string. Other than that, it's really my B, G, and low E strings, and really it's not that far, right? I really only do a whole step on my B string. Other than that, I'm really looking for a half step, and sometimes even a half step is a hard job. I don't know why, but it seems like the A strings and the D strings, maybe they're under greater tension, but they don't want to move as much. You know, that's a hard move, and I feel like it's never quite right in tune. There you go. Tough for me. Cool. Surf and Jiu-Jitsu says, so I've been playing for about 8 years. Started on bluegrass, got away from it for a while. I'm just getting back into it. I'm having problems with putting licks together, like running a G lick into a C lick and so on. I was wondering if you have a video on that, or if you could make one, please. You know what? I actually kind of answered this question a little bit in my last video, so if you want, you should check out that Bad Advice for Bluegrass Guitarist video. The idea is, why would you learn a lick instead of learning how the lick was constructed, right? You want to be able to construct your own licks instead of relying on the 10 that you know. Why don't you learn how to make them and you can have infinity of them? This is admittedly the answer that people don't want to hear, but when you learn a lick, I think you should deconstruct it a lot. So even if we take a lick that we all know, like the Lester Flat G run, so just by playing that, I learned that number one, bluegrass is going to be mostly pentatonic, right? That's almost, well, that is just a pentatonic scale, right? That's the My Girl sound. I also know that bluegrass is going to be okay with a flat third sound. And that flat third isn't hung on, it's quickly resolved up. So even just using that, just the idea that things are pentatonic in nature, and if I use a flat third, I resolve it up, I can create lots of bluegrassy things, right? Maybe one more thing I can take from the lick is that the notes are they fill in all the gaps, right? There's not a lot of pauses. So I could try that. And obviously, that's not super bluegrassy, but it's certainly pushing me in the right direction. Now, if you do that with every lick you ever learn, you kind of get in a better situation, right? Instead of having a lick for a G chord and a lick for a C chord and trying to make them fit together when they're probably not going to, you have an idea of what kind of stuff to play over a G chord, an idea of what kind of stuff to play over a C chord, and you're not really stuck to these rigid examples. Anyway, I hope that helps at least a little bit. Janet O'Connor says, "Hi Marcel, great lesson. Could you do a lesson on White Freightliner Blues as played by Molly Tuttle? All the best from the UK." Well, hey there. Yes, I do want to do that. I want to do like a 5 things you should steal from Molly Tuttle's White Freightliner, but I haven't done it yet. I'm sorry about that. However, if you do just want to see how she plays it, I did tab the whole thing out based on this performance. Maybe if I do one of those, the thing will appear. So if you just want to go and see the whole thing, you can do that. But fair warning, I think it's a 10-page tab, and it's very fast. It's really hard. I can't play it up to speed. It's tough. And Molly, if you ever see this for some reason, I saw you at Wintergrass 2017, but you were talking to Joe Walsh by the elevators, and I didn't want to bother you guys, so I was too scared to say hi. Also, my friend was in a jam circle with you for a while, but I think your talent scared him off, so there's that. If you don't know who Molly Tuttle is, you should. She's an incredible flat picker, and she's been really, like, I don't know, I don't want to say climbing the ranks, but I guess she's been getting, like, really popular lately. I've been seeing her name everywhere. She was on the cover of Acoustic Guitar Magazine recently. She was on the cover. Look, that's her. Also, shout out to the lady at the end of this particular recording of White Freightliner, because she says, "How the hell did you learn to play like that?" But they obviously cut the video short. Yay! And you can see Molly's head turn, just like in slow motion. You can just tell it's going to be an awkward moment, and I love it. Alright, next up. Can you show how these licks apply further down the neck? Cool, so this question was posted on my triplet licks video, and I wrote a big response. You're welcome to read it. But I wasn't really satisfied with that, so I'm going to answer it here as well. When you try to do a strict hammer-on triplet like this, without using an open string, you get a serious amount of decay. That last note is not very loud. Right, so if I string a bunch of them together, that last note's going to be swallowed up by a banjo player or a fiddle player every single time. But if I pick all of them, I have a much more level amount of sound coming out of my instrument. So for that reason, I really don't recommend that you use hammer-on triplets, you know, up the neck. You really sacrifice a lot in volume and consistency of tone. That being said, what I call the Rice triplet and the Sutton triplet, which are basically triplets created with a hammer-on or with a pull-off, you know, just 2 notes though, and then the third note would be picked. I think those can be used up the neck all the time. For instance, if you set up a scenario like, Right, that's 3 notes. That could be a triplet. Or a scenario like, I mean, that would be great. I think those work fine. And that's really what I'm getting at, right? As far as repeating triplets up the neck, a lot of people set up scenarios like this. Which, if you want, yeah, I mean, you can use this over a G chord. But honestly, I think those are a little hacky. They feel a little lazy in bluegrass. Everyone else is creating long lines. We should be able to as well. And that's why I feel disappointed sometimes when I listen to, I don't know, some of those maybe jam grassy bands. Sometimes their players will do a lot of those repeater licks. And it's not that I don't like them and I don't think they're cool. I mean, those bands are obviously borrowing from rock and roll. But when you're playing bluegrass songs, you know, I like the lines better than I like the repeats. Okay, last question. Johnny C. Major says, "What's on your head?" Normally a hat of some sort. Hey folks, today we're going to be working on... Hey folks, today we're going to work on our... Hey folks, in this video we're going to be working on everyone, Marcel. Cool, so if you like that video, once again, please consider subscribing. You can like this video. You can leave a comment down below. You can also find me on my website, lessonswithmarcel.com. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook. And also you can join my mailing list if you'd like to. I guess I'll see you next time.